Hey everybody, I want to welcome everybody to this new episode of Strange Appalachia. Um, the one we're going to be doing tonight is it's kind of a weird cryptid, and I know we say that a lot because we do a lot of weird cryptids. Um, I mean, we did do the giant bird that had an octopus for a mouth. You know, that's kind of a weird thing you wouldn't expect to see. Uh, but this cryptid tonight comes out of Grafton, West Virginia, and it's such a strange story. I mean, it works the same as a lot of the other stories, but it's such just a weird monster to see. It's called the Grafton Monster is the common name for it, though. But before we get started with that, JD's got some pretty cool news of the weird to share.
Sure. So the news of the weird I came across, and I sent this on to you because it's more from down in your area, sort of. But it comes out of Middle Tennessee, sort of northwest of Nashville. And this happened, it's about a week ago. I don't remember the exact date on it. No, it's not even been that long. It's been about 4 days ago, 5 days ago. Um, but there was a unexplained phenomenon, is what it's being billed as, that caused the ground to shake in Middle Tennessee. And there was a loud explosion, ground shaking, stuff like that. Uh, Police were sent out. They went out with the fire department and some of the emergency management people, and found no evidence of anything that had blown up, and definitely nothing that had blown up big enough to make the ground shake. But I would say the more surprising thing that came out of this article is that it didn't register as an earthquake on a seismograph or anything. So that's really weird that the ground shook, but there's no evidence of the ground shaking other than a few like home security videos. So just an unknown phenomenon is what it was billed as, and I am content to let it be called that because I've got no other thoughts on what that might be.
Yeah, one of the things that makes me think is it could be like a sonic boom.
hmm
You know, I mean that's not that far from here in Oak Ridge. I mean, drive wise it is, but
So the
you know,
article does mention that there's a military base in the area, but they were on a 4 day Labor Day weekend, and they were not running maneuvers. So that's a little odd, but definitely, the grand scheme of government cover-ups and weird stuff the government does, flying a plane around on Labor Day weekend would not be the least common thing there, I would think.
no, you wouldn't see that very often. I wouldn't think either. I mean, and the sonic boom thing, that's a stretch. I mean, to me, it does seem like there should be an explosion somewhere.
Sure.
But I mean, there was a local explosion here. I don't know, probably 6 months ago, where a gas main blew up under a guy's house, and it happened at about 4:15 in the morning, which happens to be the same time that I go to work. And I had walked out to the car to go to work when it happened, and it was probably 20 miles away from me, and it shook the entire house. But it's a pretty large explosion. Luckily, no one was hurt in that one. But um, I drove by the house later on, and it was totally leveled, like leveled to the point where you couldn't tell that there was a house there.
Hmm.
So, I would think somebody would notice something that large. You'd be able
Yeah.
to hear it. So, pretty weird. Pretty weird.
All right. With that out of the way, I'll let you go ahead and start this Grafton Monster story. Uh,
Yeah.
but I do want to preface it by giving a teaser that this has one of my favorite nonsense explanations of all time.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So, the first sighting was in 1964. Um, and of course, this is near the town of Grafton. Grafton also has another claim to fame. That's where Mother's Day was invented in the United States.
Mm.
So but the first sighting was in 1964 on June 16th by a reporter for the Grafton Sentinel. His name is Robin Cockrell. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Um,
That
he said,
sounds right on my end.
yeah, he said he was driving around a wide curve. He slowed down and his headlights hit a large white obstruction on the right side of the road, standing between the road and the riverbed on a cleared off section of grass. Upon realizing that it was a living creature, he quickly turned around and raced home. He said then he called two of his friends. They searched the same spot in the road, but they could not find the creature or its tracks, and only the grass, where the grass it should have been crushed.
So if I could interject real quick,
Yeah.
Something that I've got in one of the reports that you didn't mention there is his actual description of it. He described it as being 7 to 9 foot tall, about 4 foot wide, and had seal-like skin that was white.
Yeah.
So,
Also, no head.
right.
It was supposed to be headless. There's more than 20 sightings after that one. Let's see. Grafton goes on to say that he saw the thing when he was a child with his father when they were out cutting wood and loading it up.
Okay, I have not seen that that part of it.
He said, here we go. I got a quote right here. It says, I've seen the Grafton Monster several times when I was young, and it's very real. My first encounter was with my father cutting wood. We had finished and were loading the truck when our two dogs started barking. We stood and listened. Something was walking and getting closer. My dad told me to get the gun from the cab. He said it was a 10 gauge with double aught buck. Whatever it was had picked up its pace and continued toward us. It stopped about 50 to 55 yards and went quiet. My dad pulled both hammers back and stood in front of me and told me to be ready. He said it stepped out, looked at us, took 3 strides in our direction, turned and walked back to the tree line. And he said his second encounter was 2 months later when he spotted it on the opposite side of the area they were in, and he said, quote, I got the hell out of the area. So, this guy's seen it several times throughout his life.
One of the things that I found, and I don't know how far you're going with the background and intro story here, but one of the things I found to be interesting is, he works at this newspaper in town, and he saw this thing on June the 16th, but he didn't actually run a story on this until 2 days later on the 18th. And the only reason he ran a story on it is there had been several other people call in and report seeing the same thing, according to him, or the same type of thing. So it wasn't like, unless he's completely made up his story and, thought well enough ahead to make a somewhat of an alibi, I guess. It's not like he was doing it for the fame or the glory of it either. It doesn't sound like, because he waited and basically heard other reports of the same thing before he ran a story on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff besides the fact that it's a giant headless monster about this story that are weird.
And the other thing about the story that sort of strikes me as a little bit odd is he wrote this article on the 18th about it. But it seems like after that, the newspaper, whoever the editor was, or something like that, sort of started making fun of people who were looking for it, with their editorial sections and stuff like that. And, basically said this thing wasn't real, that it had been laid to rest, that it was debunked as something else. And since you're the one that turned me on to that explanation for it, I'll let you tell that. But it is my absolute favorite debunking explanation of all time.
So Mr. Cockrell, he sold the story to UFO Phenomenon magazine, to a guy named Gray Barker is the guy's name. I'm about to say Gary Barker, but it's Gray Barker. And anyway, the more and more they started looking around, this guy supposedly found other people that had seen something similar to it. I'm trying to find it right here. The Grafton Sentinel, which is where Mr. Barker worked, or not Mr. Barker, Mr. Cockrell worked, they actually reported it as, quote, that the alleged monster was simply an individual who had been pushing a hand cart loaded high with boxes along Riverside Drive on Tuesday night, end quote. So this guy's driving along and he sees a giant monster on the side of the road that's, you know,
9
7, 8
foot tall.
Yeah, 4 foot wide, and it doesn't have a head, and it's beside a river. And the newspaper says it's a cart with boxes. And I don't know on a Tuesday night how boring Grafton is. I mean, Grafton's a small town, kind of like where we grew up. There's like 5,000 people in the town, but I would think Tuesday night you would be in bed instead of out pushing a cart full of boxes. But
Along the river.
Along the river, I just love the description of that.
Yeah. And so there are some other sort of debunk explanations that are almost as unhelpful as that one. My favorite of the others is that it was an escaped polar bear.
An escaped polar bear, that's correct.
Which is a really fun explanation because there are no polar bears anywhere in that area to even escape from somewhere.
Yeah, they don't know. Nobody can tell you where it escaped from.
Yeah, there's no reported polar bear missing from any zoo, even remotely close. And the biologist in me would think somebody would take note of a polar bear not being where it was supposed to be. They're the biggest bear in the world, and they're mean. So
maybe it was pulling the. Maybe
somebody would know.
Yeah, maybe the polar bear was pulling the cart. I don't know, man.
Hey, that's possible.
That's one of those. So, I don't know, man. I've seen people say that it's Bigfoot or an offshoot of Bigfoot, that it's almost like a hunchback, where the head is lower on the chest, and the back comes up over it. I've seen people describe it as an ogre or draw it as an ogre, kind of the same thing, where the head sits down on the chest, and kind of like your typical ogre or giant mythology, with the hunch behind its back. And of course, Fallout 76 did it, where it's just a giant faceless mass with arms and legs.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty good rendition of it, I think.
I've seen a couple of reports that it's associated with aliens. Of course, any good cryptid's going to be associated with aliens.
Right.
And also an escaped Cold War era experiment, I guess is the best word.
Yeah. Some kind of mutation. Kind of the same thing that you hear for Mothman, that it's.
Right. So bringing up Mothman there real quick, I think it is important to point out that in the span of what seems like about 10 to 12 years, West Virginia was sort of the epicenter of every major new cryptid sighting in America, it seems like.
Yeah.
We talked last time about the Flatwoods Monster. We talked way long time back about the Mothman, and now we've got the Grafton Monster. And all of those are in a state that's really not a huge state. I mean, it's got some pretty good territory to it, but at the end of the day, it's not a super huge state. And in less than 12 years or so, all three of those are sort of new cryptids that nobody had ever really reported before, coming out of the same state in less than 10 years. So that's an interesting coincidence at worst, and somewhat of a connection maybe at best.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we could go full on conspiracy theory with it and say, that something was released in the area.
Or multiple somethings.
Yeah, some kind of dimensional thing was opened. West Virginia is a really, really interesting state. I've only been there once, and I know you've been through it once.
Mm-hmm.
And the mountains there are really amazing. And I mean, we grew up in the mountains, and we've seen a lot of big mountains. And while the mountains there in West Virginia aren't the biggest mountains, It's really crazy to see them stretch out like that before you when you get up there.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I mean, I felt really isolated driving through
And the other fun thing about this is a cryptid sighting that I can't, just look at you and say, yeah, it was an owl,
there.
because I don't know of any 9 foot headless owls.
I mean, I guess you could stretch it and say, that he saw an owl because I mean, from behind you could kind of think it's headless,
Yeah, but
but
it would be 9 foot tall.
no, it wouldn't be.
So I'm this is one that I'm gonna have to go, and as much as it pains me to say it, I don't have any good explanation for what this thing is.
Yeah,
So you know what? I'm going to push all my chips into it's a guy pushing a handcart with boxes. Why?
I just, I
That's as
just,
good a description as I got of anything else.
so if it's real, now there's always the possibility, that he's
Right.
lying about it. It's a hoax. Um,
Which
there's
is
not
is honestly, if you think about it, that is probably the most likely outcome.
correct. I mean, the
Um,
man's trying to sell newspapers.
right. But again, at the end of the day, there's that's the only explanation that really makes sense. Because I mean,
Correct.
everything else is interdimensional being, which there's no proof of, or aliens, which there's no real proof of, and a guy pushing a hand cart, which is ridiculous, and a guy, seeing an escaped polar bear that there's no escaped polar bears anywhere nearby, or anywhere even, not even just nearby. That's not something you lose.
Yeah.
So it's made up story or something that we have no earthly idea what it is are the only two options that make sense.
Yes. Like any good cryptid, there is a Grafton Monster Festival.
Oh, you daggone straight there is.
Yeah, there's no reason to leave out a reason to eat funnel cake.
Nope. Got to have funnel cake.
So let's see if I can get a date on the Grafton Monster Festival.
Maybe while you're looking that up, maybe we need to look into having a Strange Appalachia festival and selling funnel cake.
Let's see. Grafton Monster, they call it part of the Big Three. That's pretty good.
If it's not June 18th, I'm going to be super disappointed, or June 16th.
Uh, let's see.
All right. While he's looking, I'll go ahead and do my normal sort of closing call type thing. If you like what you hear, be sure to give us a like and subscribe here on YouTube. Check out our Facebook page. We'll if we ever get to the point where we can go to festivals and do stuff like that, we'll post that information there. We're Strange Appalachia both on YouTube and on Facebook. So check us out. Give us a like. Let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. If you've got somewhere you'd like us to investigate or something you'd like us to look into, we're more than happy to try to set that up and get out to where you're at and see what you got going on.
All right, so there is no Grafton Monster Festival this year because of coronavirus, but it would be in September.
September. What an excellent opportunity missed to have it in June.
I don't know, man.
I mean, it'd probably be a little warm in June, but
Yeah, but so they were going to do it in September. Oh
yeah,
well.
that makes sense. It's a fall festival now.
So
So anything you want to add to the closing of it then?
no, that's all I've got. I know the Grafton Monster. There's not a whole lot to talk about with it, other than it's just a really popular monster. Like I said, it's part of the Big Three, is what they're calling it. So it's the Flatwoods Monster, the Mothman, and the Grafton Monster are the Big
Yep.
Three. So that's pretty interesting. I've never seen it. I've never seen it put that way though. So
I hadn't either. But again, all of those sprang up within, 10 to 12 years of one another and sort of in the same place, roughly the same place, the mountains of West Virginia. So that's definitely interesting.
yeah, I like it.
Coincidence at worst and definite link at best. So who knows?
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
All right. See y'all next time.